Good morning, and thank you so much for the invitation, Jade and Eddie, for the introduction. It's fantastic to be here. Thanks for getting up early in the morning and enjoying some great coffee and coming along. My name's Rob Garrett. I'm an independent curator, and in the visual arts field, it means that basically I get to conceive an exhibition project very often, and then choose the artists and the artworks. So Lost in a Dream is a perfect example of that, because this is a project where I had completely free reign. The very idea for the project and the shape of it was entirely up to me. So the context of this is that I was invited by the fantastic guys, James and Sam, at Snake Pit. Snake Pit is our own Central City artist-run space. It's on High Street. It's the old Paris, Texas venue, 33 High Street. And James and Sam are recent graduates from Illin, and they decided that they needed both an exhibition space as well as a production facility. So it's a building that has an exhibition on the upper floor, but studio spaces in the downstairs floors, and they're just expanding that studio space. So once they've finished refitting the basement, which was the old Box nightclub, they'll have accommodation for about 30 or 34 artists. This is quite a rare model in New Zealand, but quite a common one in Europe. And I spent a lot of time traveling in Europe, and particularly in Germany. So it's quite nice to see this developing and to see the community that's developing around it. Well, they just said one day, we'd like you to curate a show. They've been on a kind of month-by-month lease in this building, because the building owners are wanting it either demolished and developed or properly occupied by people who can pay proper rent. And so 4 months out from the date, we felt quite brave to set a date for an exhibition where the gallery may not exist. In thinking about this show and this invitation, as a curator, I was thinking about, well, what would I do that draws from my own experience and interests that would be interesting in this context? The Snake Pit program is a lot of emerging artists, and they curate a lot of local emerging artists, so I thought it would be useful to do something that was a bit different from that, and to bring in some artists who might be new and unusual and fresh in the Auckland context. So I immediately thought about an international show, and then I started thinking about which artworks or artists I might want to have in that international show. And very early on I'd seen online a video work by Cecile B. Evans called Straight Up. And of all the artists in the show, she's actually the one artist that I don't know personally already. I'd seen this video and I thought, this is amazing. This is, in this video, Cecile B. Evans, this is her, she became our poster girl. So you can see that ultimately she said yes, although she needed quite a bit of email seduction. It just has to come down to that. And this video, Straight Up, what she is doing is she is deaf signing to Paula Abdul's song Straight Up from 1998. It was a #1 hit single then, and she's deaf signing to it. And Paula Abdul's song is a little bit about longing and frustration. You know, do you really love me? Come on, get it together. What's really going on? And when she's doing this video, during the course of the 7 minutes, you realize that things are becoming a little bit loose and you don't know what's going on. And then there's all these animation effects that start popping out of her hand signals. Well, she's actually getting drunk. She's getting increasingly inebriated through the show. So she kind of updates Paula Abdul. So the anxiety and the longing in Paula Abdul is updated with, well, whatever. So there's this beautifully fresh approach. Well, when she said yes to this work, suddenly the theme began to coalesce for me. And the title, Lost in a Dream, is one of the lines from the Paula Abdul song. Most of the projects that I'm doing are site-specific. So when I was looking at how do I develop a theme, I was looking at, yes, this work, it comes out of the work itself, but in reference to Snake Pit as well. The basement of Snake Pit, which they've been using for gigs and now refitting for studio space, was the Siren, in the early, when was it? The late 80s. And then it got transformed by Simon Grigg and his mates into Cause Célèbre and The Box. So I was wanting something in the show that would refer to that history of the site as well. So Cecile's work was a perfect fit. And then it just coalesced around that a number of other artists just fitted into place. And part of the context is my travel, as I said. So here there's a couple of studio shots. One of the works that I was really keen to get hold of was Olga Chernyshev's The Train. Train is another video work where she's filming inside a Moscow train, and then there's a moment of slippage where it suddenly goes to a corridor of a hospital and then it back to the train. So there's this kind of dream world, hallucinatory aspect to, as well as quite gritty aspect to the video. I first met her in 2005 and did a studio visit with her in Moscow, and that's her up on the upper right there. And then, so some of the artists were chosen in that way, and down in the bottom right, there's Katrin Kampmann's studio in Berlin, and she's an artist that I met in Berlin this April. So from artists that I've known for some time to those that I've just recently met, there became a bit of a list. The dark brown names here, Olga, Georgianne, Cecile, Grant. Grant is one of our local artists. He's just up here at the back. Stand up, Grant, please. Grant Gallagher. You'll see some examples of his work shortly. Alexander Illin, Katrin, and Anastasiya. These were artists who I was after right at the beginning, and they all said yes, and then the other artists came into place. So in thinking about how to shape the show and what the theme would be, I was thinking about how do individual works begin resonating off each other, so to create for the audience a sense of there's some coherency, but there's also variety. So what transpired was that I was interested in works that captured some principle of uncertainty. The sense that you might be looking at one thing and then find that it's undercut or contradicted by something else. And so is it a contrast between truth and dreaming, or is it a contrast between love and some foolish cliche, as in Anastasiya Close's backyard true love video where she's stroking her cat in the sun? Is it a contradiction between waking and sleeping? So here's an example of Olga's, a still from Olga's video, The Train, which I mentioned before. And here is the work by Georgianne Dean. I just want to talk a little bit about how I met Georgianne as well. She's the artist that I've known the longest. Years ago in Dunedin, I was running an international residency program and came across this artist in Juxtapose magazine and thought, wow, these paintings are wild. And I wonder if she'd be interested in coming to Dunedin for 6 to 8 weeks to do some work. So then it was phone and fax. And so I tracked down her details and got her on the phone and pitched Dunedin to her, which actually for a 6-week visit, Dunedin's an amazing city. If you say it's a town of 100,000 people, to someone who knows the American Midwest, they think it probably doesn't even have a petrol station. So there's lots of things, I talked about the email seduction for Cecile B. Evans. What do you need to explain to somebody who really doesn't know what this is like? So when you tell the story of Dunedin, it has its own symphony orchestra. It's got a university that was founded in the 1860s. It has all this kind of institutional heft and depth and character and a vibrant arts community and so on. And then they start getting really interested. She came for 6 to 8 weeks and did this a wonderful research residency where we become really good friends. She made friends with New Zealand artists as well. So there's an ongoing California Dunedin dialogue still between Georgianne and some other local artists, Mary Rose Crook in particular. So we're online friends as well. So last year I saw her post this image of this painting and I just fell in love with the painting. So a few months ago I messaged her and said, is it still in your possession or did somebody buy it? And she said, oh damn it, nobody's bought it. So I said, I want it. So she shipped it out for the show. So you'll have to go and see the show. Or get a catalogue. I've got a carton of catalogues as well. But this is a spin in the teacups is a must, which is an advertising slogan from Disneyland. So the teacup there, there's this couple there. And this might be the character from King Kong with a baby Kong locked in embrace. It's this romantic kiss, passionate kiss between these two very, very different characters. Cecile B. Evans' projection here, I've talked about that. And then one of the other artists that I was really interested in terms of providing a very fresh perspective for Aucklanders was Grant. And just pointed out Grant before. Grant's been secretly working away for 3 decades making sculptures. And it was an assistant that I had working for me years ago who said to me, look, you've got to meet this family friend. I've arranged a meeting, come around and have a look at what he's been doing. And discovered this rich storehouse of amazing sculptural work. So this is a really special opportunity to be able to show a whole body of work. This is a suite of 12 sculptures that Grant made from 1999 to 2001. And to show this for the very first time, but this is very exciting in itself. But the aesthetic and the idiom that he's working in here also, I could see, would resonate for many of the younger artists in their current practice. So I was always looking for connections, not only connections between the artworks, but connections between these works and a very particular audience. This is a very site-specific audience. How will this work stimulate and inspire and provoke, in some ways, the audience that really already exists in this space? Another artist who was a fantastic discovery, if you like, is Alexander Illin, who's one of our 2 Russian artists, but he's a recent migrant to New Zealand, and somehow when he arrived off the plane in January, he got my name and emailed me almost instantly with this portfolio of 19 portraits that he'd made in Moscow, with asking for advice about what to do with it. Now, Alexander is not art trained. He's a commercial photographer, and he said to me in his email, look, this is the first conceptual project. This is the first conceptual art project that I've done, and I'm not quite sure what to do with it. And so some months later, when I was talking with him again and say, well, actually, I'd like to show it, there was a really nice conclusion to that story. This was one of the highlights for many people who came to the opening on Friday. This very, very powerful portraits. Very, very briefly, the story of these portraits is that these 19 men all live in the same community. Some of them are monks, and some of them are the mentally ill. And he doesn't tell you which. He confronts them, if you like, or portrays them with the same directness. The individuality of each of these men stands very clearly within the frame. He doesn't apply a kind of template to them. They are very, very powerful and fresh. In the Moscow context, where the mentally ill and others who are not normal have been hidden away for years under the Soviet regime, the very publicness of these figures creates a prejudicial challenge for ordinary Russian people. And that was the context in which he developed the work, to present a body of work that might challenge those prejudices. His own statement says, it's up to you to decide whether you approach these in terms of the humanity you see in front of you or the prejudices you carry with you. So to bring that exhibition here into an Auckland context where the debates around those kinds of public presentations of different types of people has moved a little bit, it's different from that, possibly makes us aware that cultural context matters in the way we read works and the way we can appreciate works. But the human resonance of these works is just as powerful in this context. Katrin and I met in Berlin when I traveled to Berlin to go to the opening of the 7th Berlin Biennale, and they have a gallery week there, much like Art Week here. All the galleries do very, very special projects, so it's a great networking opportunity. Berlin is a fantastic cultural hub anyway. New Zealanders are attracted there, writers, musicians and artists. It's a city that's very tolerant of itinerant creative communities as well. So you don't need to live there to be taken seriously. You can come and go and still have very, very vibrant networks. Met Katrin, saw this work, Solaris, and you may recognize the name from the movie, the Tarkovsky movie, or the Stanislaw Lem novel, Solaris, and immediately fell in love with this work and some other work, and Katrin and I are already planning another project where she will come to New Zealand and do some other work. But wanted to include this work right from the beginning. This was one of the anchor works for the show, and when she said yes, that it was still available, that was fantastic. But then she also said, when she heard that I had got Cecile B. Evans and was working with the Paula Abdul song, she went away and looked at the lyrics and came back to me, and we had a Skype conversation. She said, actually, what I want to do is make 2 new portraits for you based on the song, and I've just chosen these 2 lines from the song, do you love me, and you are so hard to read, from the Paula Abdul song, because she said, I see a connection between these and a movie by Sautet starring Romy Schneider, who was the screen idol still in Germany. where there's a couple riding in a car after a dinner party, and she is his mistress. And she is trying to provoke him into saying, I love you, by trying to get him to argue with her. And he, meanwhile, is thinking, I've just written this letter to you, which I haven't given you, to break up with you because I'm so guilty about what I'm doing to my wife. But now I've changed my mind and I want to marry you. So there's this inability to communicate true feelings between each other. And she wanted these portraits to face off, and she thought that would fit the theme of the show. So to have this context-specific work created for the show, I thought was particularly fantastic. Anastasiya Close is a Melbourne artist, fantastic video and performance artist. Curated her into a Swedish video art festival earlier this year, and that's how I came across her work. And I wanted to include another work, this one here. She and her cat are making love in the backyard in a sunny Melbourne afternoon, and it's just one of those beautiful, very private and slightly gauche moments that very rarely comes into the public art world, and I like its freshness because of that. And here a work by Anna Nordqvist Andersson from Sweden. Fantastic photographer, does a lot of site-specific photography, but in this case the hypnagogic is referring to a clinical state in which some people have quite powerful visual hallucinations as they move from wakefulness to sleep, so that it creates an uncertainty about whether they are actually awake or not. And it's suggested by these, that if you look closely at this image, you'll see that in fact the eyeballs are visible through the eyelids. So just a beautifully powerful work. Paul Hardigan did a new light installation in the street for us. Nathan Gray's moire pattern video work using acetates and animation. Virginie Mosse, an artist that I actually met via Facebook and then met in person in Berlin this year and did a studio visit with her, some collages by her. Andre Sampson, another local artist. Emma Garrett, my daughter, who's in Dunedin. Yay for the family. And a fantastic painter. Robbie Fraser, a fantastic local painter who's also running Ferrari Gallery in Grey Lynn. And there's a context with Alexander's works. What I loved about the space too is you've got these beautiful view shafts. Even though it's an artist-run space, it has the proportions of a museum. So as a curator, you can set up these wonderful relationships between works in rooms and down sightlines. I want to give a huge plug for the other people who are involved. I've already mentioned Sam and James at Snake Pit. But when I was thinking about the show and the way these kinds of exhibitions need to be presented, particularly in Europe, they need a catalogue. And this is done on a shoestring. So then I asked my friends if they knew of somebody who might like to volunteer as a designer. Ophelia King is a goddess. She has done a fantastic job of designing all the collateral, and as I said, the catalogues are just a fantastic feel, and I wanted something that would slip into the purse in the pocket that you wouldn't be able to let go. I've been carrying my copy around, trying to scruff it up, and it still bounces back ever since we got the printer's proofs. But also, the audience is not just the audience that will go into the gallery, so one of the things we've been aiming to do is get as much media coverage as possible for this as well. So we've, I have met targets. It's very happy here. But thinking in the Creative Mornings context, what were the challenges? This had to be low cost because all the money that went into it, all the cash that's gone into it is my own. There's no client paying for this. So it's got to be low cost but also high quality. And will the artist say yes was clearly a challenge. The timing issue, can we actually set a date when there's an indeterminate lease, and given the lead time that's required for this? Getting cut through, getting the audience along and getting the media cut through. Who is the audience? That's a challenge to think about who that is. I think in Auckland, the Auckland art scene tends to be a little bit homogenous in many ways. So one of the reasons we pitched the Russian artists within all of our social media and other advertising was to try and pull part of the Russian community that has made Auckland home as well, and the opening achieved that. My timer is telling me it's nearly 20 minutes. So the catalogue design and print, I mentioned that was clearly going to be a challenge, and it turned out to be an absolute dream. One of the things we looked at is going with Blurb as an online publisher, and beautiful beautiful print proof that came back, but when we actually looked at the size of the catalogue and so on, it proved being too expensive, because what I was one of my targets in the design and print was to have this retail at $10 or less and still break even or make a profit. And that's what we've achieved. So $10 cash, and it still makes a profit on, clearly the design came free on the print. So we ended up printing locally rather than through Blurb. Then the logistics I've mentioned around just getting works here, but interestingly, the most tricky logistics ended up being transferring video files to DVD. What was fantastic in these days is very little of this relied on usual freight. So Anna Nordqvist's photo was sent to me by file, by Dropbox, and I printed it here. The videos came by Dropbox file as well, and they were burned to DVD here. But in fact, we had some difficulty finding the right technical help, so I have to give a really huge plug to Envy Studios. If anybody's used Envy Studios, you'll know what I mean, on Anzac Avenue, and if you haven't, if you're looking for TV video work, again, just their team were amazing. So there you are. I'm really happy to answer questions, any questions, or get your feedback as well. Really encourage you to see the show, which is open Wednesdays through Saturdays until the 10th of November. And a big thank you to everybody, again, who's helped me with this project. It wouldn't work without the generosity of the artists and the people who just got on board and said, this is a great project, I want to help. And thank you again for the invitation to come along and speak this morning and share clearly my excitement about this project. Thank you.